First thing I do is find my piece of wood. Then I use my planer to give me a perfectly straight edge on one side. From there, I find the measurements of the center of my board. I take my square, mark it accordingly, hold a pencil along it, drag it all the way down, mark my center line. Carry that center line onto the edge and around to the other side. Now my board is marked. On my table, I have a grid created, but I also have pinholes set up in my Fusion file. Everything always starts here at this one, which I have programmed to G58. Obviously it starts like that before I start cutting anything. But then once I flip it, I have that to reference. So G58 is where I have programmed to come to the center of that spot. That's what I cut my bodies, my necks, virtually everything from. I have a second pinhole down here, 19 inches away from that one, and this is for my body blanks for those two. Then when I'm doing a neck, this one comes out, and I have this one at 29 inches from the original one. So that's my table setup, and just general reference lines so I can compare them with the lines on my board as well. But what will be most important is that I check the bit on my center line, because sometimes for some reason the dowel holes sometimes are off. So I need to carry this pencil line out a little further, but you can see there's part on my board on that side, and there's part on that board on that side. Now I'm going to put one of my pointy bits in my router and line that point up at G58, which is over here. And then I'm going to run my X 29 inches over to the other hole over here and make sure that that tip is right in line with that line. And I'll run it back to 0 and make sure it stays lined up all the way. So I put this on G58, which I had previously set my zeros on, and I'm going to go to XY0. So now I am right above that hole. So now I'm going to bring fairly close to the board, and I am going to compare the bit to the center line. So I don't know if I'll get this to focus well. You get the idea. So that might not come out. So I'm going to get the tip So now that that's lined up there, I'll come up to my console, put in G or X29, hit enter, and I'll watch it move along that line. Once it gets to its end point, then I will make sure that point is centered. So here we are, centered on that line again. Then I lock my handy dandy 3D printed clips into place down there, and I'm going to run this back to X0. All along it should pretty much be running right on that line. So now I'll make sure it's exactly on it there. Lock it up with my 3D printed clamps. Run it back down there again and make sure we're all still on center. This is key because then this is where it's going to drill my holes for the pins that line up with what was on the wasteboard there and what was on the wasteboard there. Alright, so I've got everything clamped down. I know it's overkill, but I printed them, I have them, so why not? So I've got my zero touch probe in place, and I am going to probe. Already green because I'm already touching it. Pull it away. Start my probe. I like to hold it in place just in case. So now we are zeroed to the top of the board, because that's how I have my program set for this first part. You can see here's my little program to do my pinholes. Cut and simple. 1/4 inch bit. I won't put the vacuum on for this one, so I'll go ahead and get my spindle rolling. Tell it to start the job. And here we go. Done. Now it'll come down 29 inches is what I have programmed in my files, and it will drill the second one. Which is going to line up with this line here. Kind of my reference point, so I know where to put the line. For a guitar body, that's where the other hole is going to be. So now getting ready for my cut of the truss rod, and I've replaced my bit because I use an 1/8 inch. You can see it's nice and centered on that hole. You follow down here, you see that hole's nice and centered as well. I won't actually use those until I flip it, and then it will line up. But I still do the same process just to verify it lines up on that line. Sometimes it doesn't for some reason, so I just use that hole as a pivot point, and then I manually have to move this like maybe a 1/16 of an inch sometimes. Probably because my machine is not perfectly square, but close. So here we go. Let's cut the truss rod cover. I had some of this extra filament that was supposed to be transparent and cool. Needed a new dust shoe, so I went a little crazy with it. So here we go. Click our fan on, our spindle on, and then we'll hit run. I have mine hooked up to a handy dandy switch. Truss rod cover cut, or hole I should say. You can see it's nice and centered with the line there. Nice and centered with the line there. So now on to our next operation. Alright, everything on our front side is now cut. So now to do the flip. So essentially, should be able to unlock everything, put a pin in here, pin in here, which will match up on the other side of the table, and then I still double check my center line with that bit to make sure it lines up, and then start carving the other side. So we'll put the pins in place. Mine are 3/8 pins. These are just some pins. I bought some 3/8 steel rod, cut it down, kind of polished it. In Fusion, I have the holes cut to 0.374, and it gives them a nice snug fit. So now, these will line up. And they're good there. But now, like I said, I'm going to check the bit in its alignment to that center line, because sometimes this side can be off by a 32nd to a 16th of an inch for some reason. As mentioned, very first thing, see how we are with our line there. And we are lined up nicely. Now let's take it to the other side. And we are right where we need to be as well. So my pens have lined up. So with everything lined up, do another X0. Follow it along the line. Nice and straight. I know it's kind of hard to tell from the camera. Oh, we're perfect. Got it all secured back down. Change my bits and on to the next action. For this side of the neck, I probe off of the table. The other side, I want to make sure the depths are correct from the top where the fretboard will mount to. And now I want to make sure all of these heights are correct from that point, in case the wood happens to be a little bit thicker than what I have in my program. So this way it will cut it exact. Have it back to my G58 start point, which is the center of that circle. This one's going to be a bit of a lengthier carve. This is going to do the outline of the neck portion, but not yet the headstock, so that way it still leaves most of the wood attached and secured. I do have a tab at the very back. And then it's going to do the rough contour of the neck. And then here is my final result. All cut out, everything lined up. Looked just the way I wanted it to.